Hatfield.
He's not.
Harris.
He's not coming in.
Singer. Trainier.
So that wasn't on my
Tumanello.
calendar.
Wilhelm. Frizzalone.
Here.
We do have a quorum. We also have Mr. Brooks present.
All right, let's do the pledge. Elizabeth, would you lead?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we need 18 minutes here now?
All right, thank you. First up, we have the approval of minutes from the regular meeting August 2nd. So moved. And a second. I have a second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next up, miscellaneous correspondence. I hope everybody got a chance to read the adult redeploy letter. Did you get a chance to read that? Thank you letter. It's very nice. From the board, appreciate that. If you didn't read it, make sure you do.
Yeah, you might say, the other interesting I found is not a number of counties that just dropped out totally. Are we going to get there?
Yes, we did. Old business. I'm going to flip-flop for a second here because I know that Jerry and Bob can be long-winded there. And I have something under other old business. Brian, can you come up? Sure. I'm going to talk about something that we just had discussed and passed at OPEB, how we do our investment timing in the OPEB. So Brian, you want to give us a little?
Yes, good morning, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Turn your mic on.
Hit the star.
Your gold star.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good, okay. Good morning, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. The OPEB board, the Other Pension Employee Benefits Board, is a pension-like obligation that the county has under several of the accounting regulations. This board contributes an amount of money on an annual basis to the pension liability for basically medical expenses of our retirees. We're in the acquisition of assets phase of that process. So over the next several years, we're going to increase between, we currently have about $10 million in assets. We're wanting to get to $20 million before that pension fund is large enough to where we can actually begin to use it. This morning, the OPEB trustees met and we began to review the quarterly investments. The Treasurer's Office was appointed to be the investment advisor for the fund. And currently, the fund, we've only been deploying the assets over the last 3 months, and we've already have an unrealized gain of about $500,000 with income about $203,000. So the portfolio is beginning to grow and operate as we would expect it to do. And during the course of the conversation, the OPEB board asked us about the timing of how often do we invest? Well, right now we do it once a year, usually at the close of the fiscal year when the board gives an appropriation of around $1 million. And so the question then came up, well, can we do investments more frequently? And I said, sure, that would make a lot of sense from the standpoint of dollar cost averaging. If you're buying several times a year, you're going to take advantage of highs and lows in the markets. And so the OPEB board passed a recommendation that we would probably make in the form of a policy, but the county board would need to act upon it, would be to do quarterly investments rather than do $1 million at the end of the year, do $250,000 in appropriations every quarter over the course of the year. That would allow the Board of Trustees to invest more prudently and more effectively. So I hope that I've encapsulated the conversation well from this morning.
Yeah, two things. One, Brian mentioned $1 million. That's what was budgeted last year or the year before. This doesn't say anything about what we will actually budget each year. That number could go up or it could go down. This is just saying, instead of investing everything all at once, at the end of the year, we would do it 4 times over the year, whatever the dollar amount is. It's broken up into quarters so that he's getting the advantage of dollar cost averaging. And this is based on the fact that we just came up with the investment strategy a couple of meetings ago, which is allowing him now to invest and make more money, grow that fund even faster so that we're fully funded in that fund.
Yeah, that's correct.
Questions? Tim?
Yeah, the other thing I would mention, this is has two other positive effects. First, it's good investment strategy, period. I mean, this is how you would invest money normally. You don't usually lump sum it, or you cost average then, and it minimizes your risk and maximizes your return. But it also is helpful within the treasurer's office because it makes that cash flow of investing on a quarterly basis a little easier to manage.
That's correct.
So it's a good policy. It doesn't speak to how much we contribute on an annual basis. Since we've started, we've never gone under $1 million. Done $2 million, I think, maybe twice. We're halfway there, making it a fund that can stand on its own, start paying out the benefits. So I think this would be a good policy for us to develop.
And so basically, my understanding is that this would be something that would take effect for us in the next fiscal year. We would continue to basically do what we're at the end of the fiscal year now, so we'll just continue to do what we're doing, but moving forward, it would be quarterly.
Yeah.
One of the we just went out for a bond issue, and of course, we all run around not patting ourselves on the back because we get this triple, double A plus, and we have people who rushing to buy our bonds, and we get a great interest rate. But it's because of the policies like having the OPEB fund that get us that rating, and which therefore gets us better interest rates. So when you do these types of policies, and when they start rating your bond rating, this really does have an effect. And in the long run, saves us probably millions of dollars.
Yep.
In our cost of money. So you should understand these policies also have a really positive effect and bring down the cost of us operating the Will County government. So it does have a kind of multiplying effect on different areas for the county. And as Melissa will tell you, when these raters come in, they love to see actually things in the policy form, right?
They love that.
We might move this to executive so we can write up the policy.
Executive, right?
I think that it would make sense to move it, because I think that the two boards need to work in concert.
Yes.
Because the OPEB board will adopt the spend policy, but the appropriation comes from the county board, so I do think it's a hand in glove. And we move it to the executive meeting, and then, if you want, I can draft up something.
Please,
Yeah,
and
you can-
put that policy together, make draft recommendations to
Right.
executive.
What I would do is, what I would recommend, Mr. Palmer, that Melissa, our finance people, and Brian sit down and work and develop the policy. I mean, that's kind of the core of our finances, so I do think the executive's office should be involved in writing that policy with the financial folks. Right? So maybe you just can all meet. You don't have to meet next, but if you get like Rashawn or Karen involved, that's all we need. So everybody basically is in agreement, and I'm sure it'll done. I think it's straightforward enough, actually.
We're talking October to bring something back, or?
Yeah, that's fine because it's actually gonna be for next year's policy. It won't affect this year's
2017
contribution.
Yeah, so we can bring it back if we want to wait, so you can adopt it in October. So I think, you know what,
Back here.
I think what we'll do is we'll just put it on the finance committee
In October.
for October, okay?
Yeah, we can have, Mr. Palmer and I can meet and
get 'em up.
have it set in something.
Don't worry about Nick, just make sure Rashawn and Karen are. You can go too, Nick.
Okay, so it's the October Finance Committee will bring forward a resolution.
We'll sit down with Michelle.
That would be fine.
We'll
Okay.
update Karen when she gets back.
Yeah.
If she comes back.
All right, very good.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everyone.
All right, now we'll get back to our regularly scheduled old business, court security, and sheriff fee study. Get out your calculators. Did you?
How many breaks did, how many
I know.
fees did I have? How many breakdowns did they have?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I will introduce Bruce. I will not screw up his last name, so.
Delashment.
As you remember, we came to you and asked for a court security fee study. Basically go over why we asked for that. There's two studies that were done. One's a court security fee study, and the other is actually the court or the sheriff's fees. The law allows for, if a study is done, to be able to raise those fees. The court security fee is set at $25 currently, and it's set by statute. That law only allows us to use that court security fee for court security purposes. We can't use it for anything else. Money has to be put back in the general fund. Currently, we're running a deficit of about $592,000 from our employee costs to actually what is being collected by the court security fee study of $25. After this, the chief judge is going to speak in reference to some of these fees also. The sheriff's fees is also set by statute unless there's a study done. And some of those fees, for example, would be serving court orders, serving warrants of arrest, attending court with prisoners, and taking bond at the ADF. Some of these fees, we're waiting for the opinion of the state's attorney on how we should apply them. So before I end, I want to give credit to Vicki Hayes and Jerry Nudary. They did a lot of work on this, putting these numbers together. As you can imagine, it was a daunting task going to division to division. So I will let Bruce speak.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce Delashment. I'm the principal of Bellwether LLC. And I wanted to say, to start with, as the undersheriff said, the court security is a new movable fee 2015. And your sheriff, along with sheriffs across the state, supported legislation through the Illinois Sheriff's Association to bring this about. The benefit for you is that it really removes the budget constraints on trying to prevent violence and terrorism in public spaces. So in many counties, we see it time and again where the sheriffs are forced to make a decision between protecting the courthouse and doing patrol. So the purpose of this fee now is to be very hyper-focused on the cost of preventing terrorism in county courthouses. Under Sheriff Contrath had been probably the most financial acumen and fastidious sponsor of a project that I've experienced. I just really wanted to take a moment and point out his leadership was key to this. There is a long document which doesn't represent the thousands of pages of calculations. I'm going to speak to it, but not read it to you. So this should move fairly quickly. If you look at page 3, this is the statute as it reads for 2016, and you'll see in there in the highlighted areas the authority to affect the changes. There are really two major points that I'll bring out in this, and they begin on page 4, the table in the middle of the page. The volume of fees collected and the fee level are what drive the revenue, obviously. Now, there are kind of infrastructure costs that all courthouses have to have, scanning machines and the square footage and some level of security, and then literally foot traffic is what drives the increased cost. The more courtrooms you have, the more people coming through, the more security you have to have. So the end result is a fairly modest increase in the fee when we compare it to what other counties experience. And their challenge is, and I can include Vermilion County, we're starting in Kankakee right now. We've done work in a lot of counties where they're looking at fees in the 50, 60, 70, even one county is looking at approaching $90 in order to cover the cost of their court security. So just in that, your scale and then the efficiency through management really helps control your costs. And I want to make sure that we point that out. The page 6 has a chart that illustrates all of the expenses. And as the undersheriff pointed out, there's about $500,000 in labor expenses that you're upside down on. But the thing about an operations review is that we literally count the hairs on a corn cob and we figure out every single expense all the way back to the cost of HR providing paychecks to the employees. So literally, your total cost of ownership for court security is included, and there's even a little bit of an expense related to the square footage. Now, Will County doesn't or hasn't previously allocated on facilities cost to departments. So we took your facilities finance data and just kind of broke it down to a square footage and came up with a conservative estimate. The result is, considering your total cost of operation, your general fund and other funds are subsidizing court security to the tune of about $1.4 million a year. So the new fee, and if you look at page 7, the new fee that seems appropriate to cover your expense takes from $25 the statute limit to $47. Now, here's a couple of things that are kind of both edges of the same sword. That as volume decreases, that's great because that means less crime is happening, but it changes the denominator for the formula. So assuming that the same number of customers are served, if you will, this fee remains constant, which should cover all of your expenses. I said all that to say this. Budgeting against volume is kind of a very careful, you really have to take a conservative approach to it. So as I said, a lot of other counties that don't enjoy the scale that you have, that don't enjoy the efficiency in operation, have higher fees. The $47 is probably not only peer comparative, but peer leading comparative. So I think it's a good statement for Will County. So I'll stop there to see if there are any questions about court security. Yes, sir.
So the way the statute reads, though, we can only recoup costs if we did have a drop in clients coming through. Of course, you would have less people working on security then, right? So the cost may wind up being the same. So then we'd still be okay. I'm just wondering if our costs dropped, but it really wouldn't be a way for it to drop.
Well, right now, you're subsidizing almost $600,000, and if it dropped a little bit, I can't see it dropping significantly. You may have to subsidize 50, 60, 70,000. With this fee, we also added 2 new employees. I want to be clear on that. We have another chart here that actually shows what our current budget is, and it breaks it down with FICA, the health insurance, and the retirement benefits. So, I mean, this fee could also be used for your new courthouse because in there, security would be considered key card access, security cameras. We've had to upgrade our security cameras in there recently. Metal detectors, I know we're going from 1 to possibly 6. So that kind of stuff could also defray the cost.
So are you saying that the cost basis here was also based on the 2 new people being in?
It was, and also
Also the negotiated salary agreements that you have with organized labor. So we try to make the number be as lasting as possible.
Okay.
And to your earlier question, there's always some ebb and flow in volume, and you could chase that all day long. What we really recommend is that unless it's a substantial change, like a new courthouse, and you want to reevaluate what your structure is, then you can look at it. But we try to anticipate as much of that as possible.
Okay. All right, other questions? Jim?
So I just want to ask another question on, you mentioned that, so the technical part, the equipment, whether it's surveillance cameras, screening, metal detectors, whatever, that's all included.
Yes.
And so a portion of this fee could be put aside, or should be put aside for technology and replacement of technology.
we did not add security cameras or factor in the new courthouse. What we factored in is our current courthouse, and there's some metal detectors and some.
I guess my point is, Bob, is that part of this fee could be put into a technology fund for the future. It doesn't all have to go into operations.
According to the law, it has to go into the general fund, which you guys.
I guess I'm asking, we could establish a replacement fund for technology fund.
I have
Well, if I'm asking.
Here, can you, not the way I read it, I don't think.
I
It's a
didn't read it that
general-
way either, because it just says who gets what in dollars, but I'm just asking.
So the formula in itself anticipates the life cycle of each piece of equipment
Shall we?
and plans for the replace cost. I'm sorry, that's on here.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, I was having a little sidebar.
So the number is there, but I can't speak to the county's practice of funding
So the part of the fee is for replacement.
on the expected life cycle. So for example, the metal screener, I think is 10
I
years.
understand that,
Yeah.
I think we understand it. So my point is unless you put the money away
Just get spent.
for the replacement, then it gets spent. You know, so I'm just, I guess I'm asking the question that, you know, I'm one of these people that really is very supportive of creating replacement funds. So when you do need the new screener, the money's there. And that money just doesn't always just go into operations, the day-to-day operations. I'm just asking that question. I'm certainly more supportive when we can do that. And you're saying that it is anticipated for replacement.
It's just not how we budget that replacement, right?
I guess we would probably have to make sure
Doesn't go away.
it doesn't go away.
Under the statute, it says shall be deposited into the county general fund, but then it says for payment solely of costs incurred by the sheriff in providing court security or for any other court services. I don't know if we can line item that under, so
It doesn't say you have to
it
spend it right
directs,
now.
directs it into the general fund, but those monies are for
Right.
those
We just have to show
purposes.
what we're going to spend it for. If we're holding it to spend it for the replacement, that should meet that code, right?
I believe in your budget, you have line items for court security revenue and court security expenses that could probably be expanded to account for. You have most of the infrastructure in place.
Other questions? All right,
Great, moving on, the sheriff's fees really cover a wide gambit. You can really break them into two categories of kind of process service, civil standby, so sheriff outward-facing fees, and then jail or inward or inmate fees. We've included a snapshot of the authority statute, and then a breakdown on the actual cost and recommended fees. So I'll draw your attention to page 9 quickly, that it probably gives the easiest list of all the fees. There are certainly more that the statute addresses, but not all of them addressing statute apply to every jail. So looking at page 10, the chart in the middle, I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question we go on? Can you tell me, under current, are we charging for any of these currently?
We are.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We are. There's a few that we are not. We're waiting for opinions from the state's attorney on.
I mean, I knew we were charging, so basically, all these, we're currently charging something.
Something, actually, to make it easier, on the top of page 11, because we're geeks and we like bar charts and things like that, we provide free bar charts. So this will give you a comparison of the first bar is the statute level, the middle bar is the current fee, and then the bar to the right is your actual cost, and it goes fee by fee across, so you can kind of see where you stand. Now, here's the things that change fees. If you've got labor programmed raises, you've got inflationary cost of services and products. So over a year, you can kind of expect about a 2.5 point decay on the appropriateness of your fee. So when we looked at the last time you had a fee review and just kind of looked at the CPI going over a number of years, most of this is just cost of living expense.
There's one fee like serving of warrants. We've never charged for serving of warrants, but the law allows us to charge $8. With our new warrant division, we're going to start doing that. We're also, as I said, waiting for the opinion on the state's attorney to find out what serving of a warrant is. If there's anybody who walks in our back door, and we serve the warrant on them, or is it just our department that is serving the warrant?
And I think that's a good opportunity to insert that these lines represent your total actual cost, and the county can make decisions on how they want to approach each fee, and as long as they come anywhere under the actual cost, then you're within statute. And there are several counties that if somebody walks in to pick up a warrant or walks in to pick up a process they're being served, that they're charged one fee versus a vehicle going out and serving it.
So, the county board would have to address each one of these fees individually? They're assessed individually?
So I'm not sure what your county practice is. Typically, we see that the finance committee puts forward an ordinance or a resolution recommending a table of fees, and
Right.
that it includes all of them, and
But you would address each one of these fees and the costs related to these fees individually, not as a group of fees.
Why not?
They
I'm
are,
asking.
they're individual, yes.
yes, sir.
Well, the information's individual. And the increases are.
But you have to justify the cost.
And the-
Yeah, we have that on below each, matter of fact, on page 11 and 12, it'll show you the individual fees and the actual cost by category.
I guess I'm not saying this clearly. So your analysis is done on every individual?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, that's what I okay.
So page 12 are the jail fees, and these are the ones that vary probably the greatest county by county. Nearly every county has a bond fee, and then they have some combination of escort, prisoner transport, inmate medical. Statute allows for you to be able to collect fees whenever possible for these, including healthcare costs for inmates. And there is very specific statute on how to do that. I know that Will County has already embraced the comptroller's local debt recovery program. This is a great program for sheriff fees and fines, because their clients, if you will, again, tend to have little collectible money from typical collection agencies, but all tend to get some payment from the state. And the LDRP is a perfect program to recover those proceeds. And I think lastly, if I point you to pages 14 and 15, we've provided just an example of ordinance and statutes, and typically we see counties, as I said, just approve a slate of fees for the department, and then the elected official sheriff has discretion on kind of substructuring those fees, as long as you don't exceed the actual cost, and you have a fair amount of latitude. Yes, sir.
Yes.
So the way I understand this, reading this chart right now, if an inmate were to request a nurse to come visit, we charge that inmate $7.50. But if they ask for a doctor to visit, it's free of charge?
So right
Page
now,
12.
your health plan and your billing doesn't discriminate between the two. So sick call in inmate or sick calls in jails typically all funnel through a screening nurse and then have a referral for a physician. And both the contract and I think your previous fee structure didn't discriminate between.
Okay, so it's $7.50 basically either.
In your current fee structure, I believe that's correct.
Thank you.
So without further questions, that is the sum of it.
Yes, Elizabeth.
I was just wondering if there's a percentage of the fees that we can expect to collect. I mean, it's not 100% collectability, it's just because you charge someone a fee. Can you always get it? So is there any well-informed percentage or expectation?
Right. In some of the fees, yes. So court security, what we find, and we do this review for counties all over the state, that there's about an 85% collection rate on court security fees, mostly driven by the fact that a large percent of them are civil related and are paid in front of the process. And then a fair number of the fees are kind of linked to some kind of a get your license back or something like that. So about 85% is kind of what we expect there. The bonding fee, now what's interesting is that the bond fee collected by the sheriff represents all the administrative cost of bonding Johnny out, if you will. When their bond presenter comes in and they hear it's $540, 500 of that is the bond, 40 is the fee. If the bond payer doesn't tend to separate the two, so they go to get $540 to get Johnny out of the box. So paying bond is fairly high percentage rate also. The caveat there is that if they have the 500 and not the 40, you can't keep them. You have to release them if they pay bond but not fee. Now, with the LDRP, you can turn right around and submit all of those bond fees and collect it back through their tax payments later on. But the bond rate has a very high rate of payment because they don't tend to separate them. Process service, it's a little bit of a competitive market on process service, but the fact is that most people who want a paper serve want them served by a uniformed professional. There's a higher compliance rate. There's some gravitas that goes with having a deputy serve it versus, Bob the server. So it's a fairly elastic market. What we would expect is that if there are other servers in Will County, that they will reset their prices to match yours because you're the market leader. But once you get below that, now some of the fees about you can't deny an inmate the right to see the nurse. You can kind of accumulate their fee balance. That's really spotty on whether you collect that. Again, the LDRP, if you're aggressive on that, that's the key for these kinds of aggressive LDRP.
Chuck?
Yeah, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have total equipment as part of your expenses.
I'm sorry, sir.
Total equipment is one of the line items that you were figuring. What exactly do you figure into that? As I said, when you look at one of the areas was taking them to a doctor and you had labor fees but no equipment, but I know we probably use a car and burn gas and that kind of stuff. So I'm just curious on if we're looking to make sure that we're maxing out our expenses so that we know what our actual fees and costs are. How does that relate?
So to your specific example, the inmate to jail doctor, I believe we presume that the physician is in-house.
No, where it says that they take them to an outside. I mean, you have a specific line.
Okay, there are, the escort inmate to medical uses the same data from the civil standby, so it does include the car and the actual dispatch time as well. So it's just they're borrowing the equipment number from the other.
So these little dashes, they don't mean zero, they mean something. I mean, kind of to what Ray was talking about, where you have a little dash, it looks like there's no dollars there because then it doesn't total up in your total expense for that. So if it's being charged, should that not be totaled up in our total expenses so that we know what those are?
So we can certainly give you the more detailed breakout on those. We have the data, it just wasn't put into the summary presentation.
So Bob, let's take an example here. The inmate nurse visit request is $750 right now.
Correct.
What percentage of those are we collecting?
If they have money in commissary, we take the money out of their commissary account. I would have to check it to see how much, what our percentage would be on collecting that. And as for the bond fee, we do have a bond fee currently, but we don't collect it at the ADI. What we do is we actually send a paperwork to the circuit clerk, and then we rely on them to collect, and we'd like to change that practice if it's allowable by law, to actually collect that fee ahead of time. Because when it goes to court, sometimes the fees get diluted when the person is sentenced.
Okay. Other questions?
And what I was told is, if they don't pay that fee, what we do is we have the commissary account actually keeps a rolling total, so if they do come in the next time with money, when we put it in the commissary account, we will deduct those fees from them later on.
So you've done this for many counties. What has been your experience on what number they move their fees to? Do they move them to the cost, pretty much?
The list that we have for you here, I would say the fees that have the highest variation among the counties are the transporting transporting inmates to court, so attending court with prisoner for both habeas corpus and any proceeding. There are some counties that have that fee in place but don't assign it, and their concern is that it somehow paints a picture of kind of paying your way to court. But I believe that's one that they're discussing with the state attorney now. The rest of them are, as the undersheriff said, on the nurse visits, doctor visits, if you've got a good discipline program of collecting either through the commissary or, and that's a great point, of recidivism when they come back, if they've got money in their pocket, put it in their commissary and they owe it that, you collect that. Those are all about the process. So I guess I'm having a hard time on those, giving you a good comparison, because it's not county by county, it's how well they're administered. And my impression is process and administrative due diligence in the sheriff's office seems to be a peer leader. I would say that. Okay.
So Bob, we have three different sets of fees. You have your jail fees, the process fees, and the court security fees. The court security fees, you had mentioned to me that the chief judge has made comment on those. Did you want to talk about those? Do you know?
I believe Roger is here, not in comment after.
Oh, I didn't see it.
After our presentation. I'd rather have him speak to you.
Yes, I would too.
I'll wait till
Yeah. All right, any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm here today to not so much talk about the actual court security fees, the court security fee, or the work that Bellwether has done. The comments I have are regarding to a separate report that came out from a task force that was put out from all three branches of government about fees in general. And that was called, and I did not print out copies, it's quite lengthy, the Statutory Court Fee Task Force Report. It came out in June of this year. The task force was made up of people from all three branches of government, state government. So there were people from the General Assembly, people from the governor's office, and people from the courts. And basically what they looked at was how are fees done throughout the state of Illinois, not one particular county, but throughout the state of Illinois. And they came up with some findings and some recommendations. And again, I will not read them to you, but I will tell you before I forget that the copy of this report is found on the on the Supreme Court website. It's under the Documents tab, and then there is a tab for reports and statistics, and it is there. It's 89 pages. That's why I didn't print out copies for everyone, but you're certainly welcome to go there and take a look at it. But I will talk a little bit about what the findings were and what their recommendations were. Again, the task force was created by the Access to Justice Act. Judges, lawyers, circuit clerks, a great deal of folks were on the committee. It was formed in 2015 in June, and the report came out in 2016 in June. the 4 findings that the task force made, and I'm paraphrasing now from the report. Number 1, they described the current fee structure as Byzantine, it's a Byzantine system that attempts to, and I'm quoting now, attempts to pass an increased share of costs of court administration, close quote, onto litigants. The second finding was that fines and fees have increased at a greater rate than inflation. They found that great variation throughout the state of Illinois on the same proceedings. So in other words, similar proceedings in one part of the state, there could be a wide variance in the cost of that to litigants in another part of the state. And finally, that the current assessments impose, and I quote, severe and disproportionate impacts, close quote, on low and moderate income residents. So based on their findings, they came up with 6 recommendations to try to resolve some of these issues. The first one of which was that there should be a uniform schedule of court assessments in non-traffic and criminal matters. So in other words, a uniform assessment throughout the state of Illinois. They recommend an increased use of current fee waiver system in civil cases. They also recommend that there should be a uniform schedule of court assessments in criminal cases. So in other words, not for the fines that are assessed in criminal cases, but on the fees that are assessed in criminal matters. They also recommend authorization of fee waivers in for criminal defendants. Obviously, again, that's not for fines, but for the fees. They suggest a uniform assessment for may appear traffic tickets, meaning that a may appear traffic ticket in one part of the state would be the same as another part. And they also recommend establishing a checklist for the General Assembly to use when considering legislation that would alter these assessments. So in a broad sense, it's clear that the state of Illinois and all of its branches are concerned about fees, how they're assessed, the variance from a fee from one part of the state to another, and the impacts that those fees have. So I would encourage you to take a look at that report. Again, it goes into much greater detail. It provides examples of different counties and how much one thing may appear in one county and how different that might be in another part of the state. And it's something to keep in mind as you go forward in making decisions about establishing fees, raising, lowering fees, et cetera. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. The chief judge is not available today, but he would love to come and talk to you in more detail about this. And he obviously got a much more detailed information when it was discussed at the chief judge's conference. I am basing my comments on what's actually in the task force report. I'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Where's that report? Where's it go?
It's on the Supreme Court of Illinois website. If you go to the Documents tab, and
Just that, do you want anybody to get that link for us?
I will send that out
Yeah.
today or tomorrow. I'll get the link
right,
and send
and
it out.
yeah, that way I didn't want to print out all the copies, but that's where it's at. And again, it talks about Will County as one example and some of the things they talk about, but a variety of other counties as well. Anyway, any other questions anybody has?
Jackie.
That was basically my question, and could you just give me the name of the report again, the 2016 statutory
It is the
court fee?
Statutory Court Fee Task Force Report.
Just want to make sure, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions, Chuck?
Is there any tables in there that show a comparison of fees by county?
They show, I don't think there's one that shows all of the fees, but what they do is they try to take certain types of cases and then show 2 or 3 different counties that have them, but the fees are available generally. I don't know that they're all tabulated in one location or not. The fees, as the report has stated, have become more and more Byzantine. I know that the circuit clerk has been working diligently on a form for the courts to use and to do these fees. And Pam, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 5 or 6 pages long. 6 pages long, just to check off all of the different fees that are assessed in court cases. So when they're talking about Byzantine, they're not kidding. It is a complicated. I'm sorry.
Double-sided.
There's a lot of
No, it's
fees.
single-sided.
3 if it's double-sided.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Roger.
You're welcome.
And the one thing I want to say is we're not creating any additional fees. We're just right now looking at what the cost and how those fees associate with the costs are. That's what our study was done on. And we don't know what's going to happen in the courts. I mean, I'd like to see us move forward with moving fees to cover costs. So we can take them in 3 groups if we want. Move that for next month. Give you time to take a look at all the numbers and move the fees for discussion. Yes, go ahead.
You know, I'm reluctant to raise fees. It seems like we're always doing that. When I listen to the analysis of the cost, and much of the fee increase is based on overhead costs that aren't necessarily a direct cost to the sheriff's department or the courts, and whether it's HR, whether it's payroll, now those are all in place to begin with. And the cost of those operations, I doubt would change. And I do think that, you know, this hits people of moderate means more than it does people who have the means to pay a fine. It also deals with when somebody, for example, not just court fees, but let's take the bond fee. And you say, well, we're now going to put a fee on. I said, well, actually, it's there, but they're not always able to collect it, so now they want to get it up front. Well, you know, how about these people who are innocent? You know, I mean, how much you going to punish them for being innocent? You know, so now you got the money. They got the money. You're not going to be able to give it back. I guess the court could order it. But my point is that I do get concerned that that this does hit many people that are least likely to be able to pay. You talk about, well, we'll take it out of the commissary. But, you know, those are people, many of them, who can't make bond to begin with. So now you're going to start charging them? They can't get themselves, they can't come up with a $200-300 bond. You know, and they may or may not be guilty of what they were, you know, charged with. So I do have some concerns that, you know, that this goes a little further than I would like to see it go. When you say you want to see all the costs paid by fees, that's not how it works. Otherwise, why would we have a real estate tax? There's a certain expectation of support from the general public for the courts, for the jail. And I don't think it was ever intended that you try to support these functions of county government with fees. So I'm reluctant to support it as it's being presented. I'm very, I don't know if we should be paying overhead. That's not a direct cost to the sheriff's department or the courts, which is a large percentage of this increase involves. So I'll tell you right now, I'm reluctant. If I had to vote right today, I'd probably vote no.
But again, I don't, that's for discussion, what the costs are. We could exclude certain things from the cost, but it's pretty obvious. It's costing us more for the security of the court and for these other things than what we're recouping in fees.
But that's the cost of county government. It's not courthouse is not supported by fees or people who are necessarily.
We're not supporting the courthouse.
So, and that includes court security. I mean, it doesn't include, it doesn't say, oh, court security is separate, that the general revenue doesn't help pay for that. I'm just saying that it's, I know it sounds good to say, well, everybody goes in and they'll have to pay. It's a way of taxing people without saying you're taxing them, I guess. Those people are impacted only if you go into the courts. I feel a little different about civil cases, by the way. You know, cost of the horse should be high. Believe me, I know. But my point is that I feel a little different about civil cases. That's something that I would apply cost to civil cases. This is differently. People are involved in lawsuits or.
But the statute doesn't allow you to.
You know, well, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the kind of thing I support. You know, Yeah, and when we start talking about security, I assume they're not just talking about the main courthouse, that they're adding traveling courts and so forth. And, I'm actually bringing up some other questions how security works in the courthouse, but I think that's probably a whole different discussion I don't want to get into. But my point is that, no, I don't think and in that, what Roger just reported out on, the Supreme Court's finding that the fees are by far going higher than the general inflation in the economy is also an indicator, and I think you need to be careful. And the other, if I'm just getting the gist of that report, if I didn't, Roger, jump in. It seems to me the Supreme Court is very concerned about how counties are applying fees these days. And if we're not careful, I think that, they'll step in and they'll make it something we don't want to see. So I'm just saying, I think they're expressing some concern about it's not uniform for the state, and I think we should, take that to heart to say, well, let's see, the Supreme Court saying, walk cautiously here, if I'm hearing what you're saying in that report.
Yeah, it's not just the Supreme Court. The actual task force was created by the Access to Justice Act, so it was actually created by the General Assembly. The courts were certainly part of it, as well as the General Assembly and the Governor's Office. So I want to make it clear that it was all three branches, not just one.
You didn't say that.
Okay.
So, but it seems to me the mood of the report is walk cautiously, folks.
I think that they're certainly concerned about the structure of fees throughout the state, and it's certainly something that they're looking at. What action they take, I have no idea at this point. Again, the report's only been out for a couple of months, but again, the Chief Judge may have better knowledge about that than I do.
Jackie?
Jim, I tend to agree with you. I was listening to a report on the radio this morning, and, the reason we have these fees is in part maybe to help fund some of what goes on, but you're right. I mean, we're county government. We're supposed to fund the courthouse. Whether we have any criminals in there or innocent people walking through our courthouse, that's our job. I think what we've seen is a lot more laws put on the books and a lot more law enforcement and judicial action. And so we've got a lot more people going through our courthouse. I was listening to a program on the way here, and there's a county in Indiana right across the border from Cincinnati. They put the highest number of residents in jail per capita. 1 out of every 10 residents goes to jail in this county across from Cincinnati. And they're trying to claim, oh, well, they're just really good at law enforcement. Yeah, you pass a bazillion dippy laws, you're gonna have everybody in jail. And that gets expensive. We're just putting a lot of people in jail in this country, and we're doing it at younger and younger ages. And then that causes them problems later on down the road, and then they can't correct their behavior sometimes because it seems insurmountable, and then they end up in jail for good.
Because fees really be kind of punitive?
Yes, very punitive, because they can go to jail for not paying their fees.
If the county board does want to raise the fees, what is the process that has to be followed?
Vote on it, that's all.
That's it. No public hearing, that's what I'm wondering. Public hearing?
We generally do public hearings for fees.
Okay, public hearing and just a resolution.
Jim?
I would, and I haven't done the percentages on all these fees. Actually, I was looking at it yesterday, I was almost confused as I was going through.
There's a lot, yeah, the fees.
But let me throw another alternative out there. If we were going to raise fees, I think we should put a ceiling on it. I know these are based on cost, but I would say no fee should increase more than 10%.
Is that forever?
No, just, well, you have to keep doing it. I know it's based on cost.
You mean at this time?
Yeah, but I'm just saying that what's included in the cost is not a direct cost to the courthouse.
Right.
You know, you're putting in what the cost is for overhead. And, you know, in business, we would apply that, right? I mean, it's a cost. And every department pays for their share of the overhead. But we never asked the departments to pay for their share of the overhead. It's not like we apply the cost to the sheriff's budget or the courthouse, or, you know, it's the overhead of the county. But that overhead is included in the cost. I know maybe allowed to be in, but I think that's a cost that the county incurs, not the sheriff's department incurs. For example, now, you know, so I'm just saying that that's a large percentage of this increase. It's not like the money's going to go back to cover the overhead. This is not.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I'm done.
Oh, okay.
I'm done. I'll get up to,
Okay.
I think I've made my
I would think, though, those of you that practice law, the Reagans and Bruce and et cetera, you all deal with the term due diligence. I would think that if we talk about this new court facility, sheriff facility, that we as a Will County legislative body have due diligence. I agree with Jackie and Jim in this case in that I would be reluctant to raise fees because of the audience that it would hurt the most. However, there's an old saying, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
Okay, Maria.
And sometimes, I just feel that I don't think that a higher fee will be deterrent. Someone look at Will County and say, "Who's your higher?" I'm not getting in trouble there. I go to the crazy to get in trouble cheaper. But they don't think of no third. However, I think there ought to be some fees associated with whatever you go in there for. And I also feel that we are obligated due diligence to do what it takes in order we get the proper facility and staff it. I understand both of your points, but I think that we do owe responsibility to keep that facility properly staffed and to be built. And I'll end my homily there.
Jackie?
I would just say that 10% seems a bit much unless we're saying we're not gonna raise these fees again for 5 to 10 years. I mean, inflation's not 10%. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, whatever the number is, there should probably be a policy in place, and maybe there is, and I'm just not aware of it, that these fees are reviewed X number of years down the road.
But if you, I will say though, excuse me, if you look at the numbers, 10% is not that much based on what the cost analysis was. We're 100% under.
No, I'm just
cost
saying that there
carries,
should be
yeah.
a schedule, just like other things that we are trying to change, like we have created the schedule for the car replacements, you know, for sheriff, those kind of things.
Mike, I'm going to point out, a large percentage of that additional cost is the overhead. That's not a direct cost for the operation of security. I mean, that's my point. It's not going to come back to cover overhead. You know, what would these fees be if you didn't apply? I think the number that was used, 1.2 million, was overhead, or was 645,000. I think I heard two numbers, but I thought that something was in excess of $1 million of the cost in here was overhead. That is not a direct cost to security. That's not going to go back to cover overhead.
Well, again, I'm not saying that you can't adjust what the fee is.
Well, I'd like to see what it would be if you did not apply the non-operational overhead.
I'm sure we could break that out. And did you have a question? And then Chuck?
Just a statement. It must be a full moon. I see Jackie and Jim on the same side. And I'm going to have to go jump over with Herb on this one. To me, I know we're looking at, you know, how fair is it that we raise the fees to the individuals that want to use our system, like the civil, the people who are doing the crime. But we have to look at also how fair is it to the individuals who abide by the law, don't use the system, and are now forced to have to subsidize through their tax payments to the extra money that we need to make sure that the system is in place and that it works. So I think there is a fine line. I disagree with the 10%, and the reason I disagree with the 10% because it arbitrarily then picks a number and it forces us into a box. There are some fees that are only 2 or 3% off, and we're really close, like serving a warrant, for instance, it's only maybe 2% off. And then there's an eviction enforcement that's down by 50%. So I think we have to be very careful if we arbitrarily just pick a number, 10%, that could put us in a
Well, when I said it wouldn't
dangerous
exceed,
situation.
you're picking not to exceed now, right? I was just using an example, I wasn't.
No, I understand that. I would rather go fee by fee versus doing it in a maximum percentage.
I go one step further too, Ray, when you talk about taxing the Will County resident. It's not all Will County residents that use the system. So how are they contributing to the cost?
I'm sure as Will County.
Chuck was next.
I'm sure Will County people in other counties too.
That's true,
This
but
is
when they
true.
go to the other counties, they're paying the fee.
Maybe they
If
are,
you look
maybe
at the
not.
chart, they're paying the fee. Chuck was next.
So any
Corey.
precedent, okay, so I agree with Ray in the fact that we need to make sure that we were looking at every fee, and I don't think Jim meant to say that every fee was gonna go up
No, I
10%.
just-
Each fee needs to be taken a look at, because we can't just vote on blanket boxes of increases, right? But has there been any precedent set on sliding scales? On ability, I mean, I'm hearing people talk about that ability to pay. You know, they have vouchers to let people not pay.
Right.
And so if we were looking at fees and real costs and taking a look at relating that and then taking a look at a ability to pay, any precedent? I don't know that we want to go down that track, but it's worth at least thinking about.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm aware of is what you talked about, which is a fee waiver. If someone believes that they cannot afford to pay the fees, they can petition the court to have those fees waived. And one of the recommendations in the report was to extend that not only in civil, which it is now in civil cases, but extend that to criminal cases for the fees that are associated with those criminal cases, not the fines, but the fees. So in that way, the court tries to respond to folks who can't afford to pay the fees.
Instead of a full waiver, though, being able to say a percentage of payment. And I don't know if that's even possible to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure you'd have
or what
to
kind
do
of
that.
work
I
that would take
have no
for
idea
those.
about that.
Corey.
When did we start first applying fees to
I have no idea.
Long time?
I think it's from day one. A long time. Yeah.
I'm just curious. When did,
1789.
did you vote yes or no?
I voted no.
I'm going to bring up this whole tax thing about, first off, there's a function of county government. The courts is one of the primary functions of county government. So just so you know that is something that the taxpayers pay for. But if you're going to raise the fees, then cut taxes.
We're trying.
Well, no. I mean, my point is that you say, well, taxpayer won't have to, well, you're raising fees. Taxpayer's not getting any break here. You're still taxing them to run the courthouse. I'm just saying, that it's, it's not a zero-sum game we're playing here. It's a plus game. Real estate tax revenues go up slightly, and now fees are going to go up. I mean, so, it's a function of county government, is my point. And it's something I think that the county should do, and I understand fees help cover some costs, but I also think you have to really apply those fees that are a direct cost, not an overhead cost, to the analysis. This does not do that. A large percentage of this is based on overhead that's not applied. It's not a direct cost for security. That's all I'm saying.
But we can get those breakdowns.
Well, we don't have them yet.
Can we get that broken down
We're not
by?
voting on it yet.
Yeah, we're not voting.
That's still probably a no, but I'd like to see what the actual cost is.
The federal circuit court started charging fees in 1917 at least. So they go back a way.
You know, and I think there's always been fees for civil matters. There's always been fees for civil matters. But on the criminal side, it's a function of the government to prosecute criminals. That's a cost. To break the law, it's the cost of government.
There's fines.
Well, fines are different. I mean, that's part of the, when you're found guilty, that's part of the punitive action that's taken against you. If you're not guilty, it's just like, oh, tough luck, you actually had to pay.
Bob, did you have something like that?
If you look at page 5, just your employee expenses is $3 million. Are you considering that overhead, or are you considering?
Anything, you have to work for the sheriff's department.
What's that?
For the sheriff's department, not working in an HR.
Yeah, that, I mean, I don't think that you're talking.
When he gave his report, he said we have unapplied overhead that's never been applied to the cost that can be.
I think that was square footage, and I think that was very minimal.
I don't think that's what he said, Bob. Well,
He's here.
Bruce?
That's what he said. He talked about overhead not applied.
Yeah.
I think what Jim's saying and what some of the discussion here is about what's the goal? Is the goal to use a report like this to establish the credibility or the validation that you can now legally raise fees? Or is the purpose of the report to show what the real numbers are so that we adjust our fees based upon that? But it depends what the purpose of it is. I mean, I don't want to use a governmental nuanced loophole that allows us to accredit, a percentage of overhead in, some other department, so we can now legally, within the bounds of law, say, well, now we can increase the fee. So the point is, what's the goal? Is the goal, yes, the goal is to raise fees, so now we're going to try to find every little nook and cranny possible, to do it, or is the goal to understand what real, true, genuine costs are and base our fees based on it? But that's what we're talking about here. That's what I think what you're getting at.
Bruce?
So,
and how much of the cost would be applied? There's. Look at that fairness.
So just a few points for clarification, and this discussion is replayed county after county of the balance between fees and taxes and the individual county's practices on balancing those two. So just some foundational statements that the purpose of the report, as you said, is to demonstrate the actual cost for Will County. The indirect costs are guided by a Federal Office of Management and Budget, Circular A87, that defines allowed indirect costs that counties can claim. And I'm sure that you're already using that formula in your grant writing and recovering expenses from federal and state finance activities. So the practice is there, the standard is there. So what I wanted to start with is our goal was to state your actual cost, and just to re-underline that the county may establish fees anywhere below the actual cost. And after some tremendous and fruitful conversation, most counties find fees that they can tolerate lower than their actual cost. And it's an educated decision that varies county by county. And I'll tell you that the fees that they change tend to vary county by county. But it's not uncommon for the bond process, if you will, and the fee to be, I'm going to pick a number. If it's $50, the county may decide that, no, although our costs are $50, we're not going to charge more than $35. With no more documentation required because you are below your actual cost in both direct and indirect. So That's kind of the foundation. The included indirects, because I just want to speak to the concern. The greatest one was facilities. And as you were looking at a new courthouse and a new county administration building, taking into account the footprint that these types of services require, in whether it's budgeted through fees or budgeted through your general fund, you need to account for and accommodate these actual expenses. That's our goal. HR, and I use that example often just to show how deep into the weeds we tend to get. I don't have the detailed spreadsheet with me, but I will believe that your HR cost to issue a check across all counties or all employees and then divided down into the number of minutes an individual transaction costs, your HR costs probably represent 3 or 4 cents per transaction, not per cent, cents. So infrastructure, and I used HR as the example to show our diligence, is really very, very small. And if you took it out, it probably was taken out with a rounding because we often round to the solid dollar coming down. But what I would encourage is, like all counties, to find the comfort level per fee and then establish your goal, understanding that every point, every dollar that you are under your actual cost, you have made a conscious decision to subsidize it. And I'll give you a great example, and you do this within Will County in animal control. The cost of adopting an animal is considerably higher than the fees that you charge. I've not studied them, but you participated in a benchmark study, and I just happen to remember that one. But like most counties, they want people to adopt animals, so they artificially suppress those fees in order to encourage the behavior. That's no different than what you have the opportunity to do here. Your actual costs are your actual costs. You may decide by statute to establish your actual fees anywhere below that.
And just to kind of summarize that whole point, I think the real idea of knowing what our actual costs are is that it keeps us from going over any fee structure, so by statute that we can't do.
May not.
So now it becomes, I think, our job to determine what we feel should be included in those actual costs so that we can make that determination.
The way I'm looking at this, though, it says $3.156 million on total expense. Only $20,000 of that is the actual overhead, equipment, personal gear, etc.
Right, that were pulled into, you're looking at court security?
Yes.
Right, that were pulled into the facilities cost, right.
I would like to see,
and again,
I do want to see the detailed breakdown of the cost. Maybe I didn't hear you correctly, but I think in your initial presentation, you actually set a number of indirect costs.
We'll provide
considerably higher.
They're exciting.
Not $20,000.
Yeah, no, the $675,000 cost that we brought up, that we pay now, that was not for the actual security portion of it.
So the large chunk of that is the technology that you talked about. There's a replacement portion of 6, I believe, X-ray scanners that every fee collects some portion of those on a 10-year cycle. And if memory serves, the plan was to replace all 6.
But it seems that there's not even an avenue to do that unless we just do it like that.
And many counties, because they just now are doing this fee, end up doing interfund borrowing for that equipment purchase and then repay that interfund borrow from a portion of the court security fees. It's a financial maneuver, but you're exactly right. Your new fee right now has a balance of 0 for accumulating equipment, and over 10 years will have accumulated enough to pay for a piece of equipment, but you need that equipment now. So I'd be happy to provide the layer of detail more. I'd like to have an analyst put a wrapper around it so that it doesn't just show up as a spreadsheet. So, but we'll provide that.
All right, so I think we'll end here on this discussion. We'll bring back next month after we've had some more looks, and then I would like to get everybody's feel next month where we want to go anyways, if at all. Okay? Thank you, Bruce. All right, any other old business? On to new business, transferring funds within the county clerk budget. Anybody from the clerk's office? This is in regards to a,
She has the
Yeah,
money
higher.
in her
Yeah,
contingency.
it's in her contingency
She
fund.
needs to fund the cost for the FICA IRF and the health benefits and support placed in her budget. She has the ability, but we need to do a resolution transfer. This
motion
is
on
in
it?
her special funds.
Move. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next up is the designation creation of funds for proceeds of the Public Act 99-0697. We're talking this is about the new fund that was created for fines on marijuana, cannabis. Short version, please.
Yeah, we're just looking for direction where the county wants us to place that certain amount, say just what we said for drug prevention.
Okay.
So we don't know whether you want to put it in the drug fund that you currently have, or you want it in new fund.
I don't think we need more funds, do we?
Well, it's already, we have to take it, so.
Right, but we don't want to create any new funds. So, everybody good with putting it in the drug fund? Yeah. A motion to that effect? Moved in second?
Is that a drug court fund, drug fund seven?
Yeah, there might be other, maybe you want to use it more for drug education, maybe you want to use some of it for drug education.
So you're gonna place this in Julie's fund for drug court
Well,
under the
that's-
case attorney's budget? Is that your
I mean,
intention?
what if we wanted to continue a program enhance the heroin program that runs out of the executive's office?
It's for drug addiction services, so it's not drug
Yeah.
Well,
prevention.
but it's pretty
So
limited.
drug addiction services.
So it just doesn't, it's not just for the drug court.
No, and that's why
For drug
I
testing.
suggested it needed to come to
Okay.
county board, so.
As long as it's a definition of the.
Yeah. Jackie.
I don't know if this is possible, but I think there are a lot of other organizations in Will County, from one end to the other, that are doing things for folks with drug addictions. I don't know if there's, can we
No.
fund them like a grant or no?
It's gotta come to our.
Okay, I wanted to ask.
Our building.
Right? Any other questions?
I asked if we could fund other drug addiction organizations in the county
In the form of grants.
in the form of grants. Can you check just to be certain? Thank you.
Now, if this, a question, if this goes into the drug court, is it then only for drug court? And I'll give you, for example,
Not just drug court.
that in that fund, could we, let's say, we've started to have some kind of working with the incarcerated criminals that we know have identified as drug abusers, and having them receiving any kind of counseling in
The drug
that.
assessment, it's not just drug court.
The one we currently have?
Yeah.
It's drug court, not health court.
Or what the fund is called.
This one is called, $15 goes to the county to fund drug addiction services.
The question remains,
Exactly, we just need some direction. We have some cases that are coming up at the end of this month, so we need to know where you're
We can help with that.
Perhaps, I mean, unless you want this going specifically to the state's attorney's
I-
duty, can we sit down and have a discussion and bring something on recommendation
Yes,
back?
I would rather do that if everybody's okay.
As long as it's options.
Yes.
Yes. Because we didn't, I mean, I haven't discussed this with the executive's office, with Julie's office, or Pam's office.
Yeah.
We could
So
possibly
can
do
we
that.
remove the motion then? Ever seen your motion? Okay. All right, thank you.
Sorry, we'll sit down. In our,
Next up is a discussion regarding the capital maintenance reserve fund for Will County Public Safety Complex. talking about this.
I wasn't concerned, but
Who put this on?
I think this is, I think that,
It's a carryover from.
Oh, yeah, right. Space. This is about the 2% contingency.
I don't know that we ever talked about a specific percentage. I think this came about because at the Laraway facility, we talked about reserving funds for long-term maintenance, but I didn't know that the board was in for specific percentage.
I think actually I brought this up, and it's about doing maintenance, basically replacement funds.
Right.
That will replace the HVAC when it needs to be replaced, or boilers. And I do think we can establish that type of account. Now, whether we can establish it individually for every building, I'm not so sure. I'd probably look at Mary a little bit. But the whole idea of just setting up, start putting something away for replacement. It's commonly done in the private sector. And I did have another, I guess this may be a question for the bond attorney, whether we could even take a percentage of bond proceeds and put it into a maintenance fund for the courthouse, replacement fee. I think they could set me, by the way, but I would ask. Something may be able to do for the courthouse. But it is established, like over time, we've established policy on reserves. We've established policy on rolling stock, even though that kind of fell apart. We should also establish a policy, we established a policy on OPEB, our post-employment benefits. I think we should also establish a policy for maintenance for replacement costs. So it's just about setting that policy. Even if it starts out slow, I mean, if we put $200,000 in 1 year, whatever, it's to start establishing a policy and a practice that you are going to have. These are, because basically what it really is, I know I'm jumping around here a little bit, basically what you have is an unfunded liability. It is a liability. And I wouldn't doubt at some point, if you don't see on the government accounting practices, that you'll have to account for that on your financials at some point. So I just think it's a good policy to establish it. You can decide the level of funding at some point or later. Would it make sense? Maybe there's additional assessment.
Okay. Well, Mr. Tackford.
If I may, good morning, everyone. If I may, I'd like to speak about, or to this subject, but within the context of the project itself, and also hopefully be able to address the issue that you just discussed, Mr. Moose, as well. But my impression was that the owner's contingency for the 2% of the guaranteed maximum price would be, and if you want to do the math on that, that's about $592,000 as a 2% of guaranteed maximum price for the project, okay? That would be an owner's contingency to enable the owner, with oversight and consent from this board, if something needed to be changed, if there was something that was completely forgotten about, let's say that in the midst of the construction of the facility, a new program comes along that requires the sheriff's department.
Yeah, we're on two different things, Dave. You're talking contingency, you're talking about maintenance
right.
in the future.
No, I know.
We established the contingency.
Oh, okay, so that's already done?
This is about maintenance for the future.
All right, so then if I may, I'd like to talk about that. I'm sorry, because I confused the two issues.
The next meeting, that's the next meeting.
Right, that's the next.
Right.
Oh, I'm looking at the, oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
You're one meeting ahead of us.
But here's a thought on this, here's a thought on this.
I wish we were in that meeting too, brother.
Sorry. Here's a thought on this issue, if I may. We're going to have proceeds coming in from the end users other than Will County Sheriff's Department.
Right.
And so possibly a percentage of
Portion
those
of that.
dollars could be allocated to what you extract.
Sean, you had,
Yes, Jim did bring this discussion up last month, and he did mention about maybe having a fund or setting something aside, small percentage aside for maintenance for our buildings combined. And after that meeting, Melissa and I and Karen had a discussion, and we did discuss briefly just about setting up a separate fund just for that.
okay.
We don't
Yeah, and
have
I-
anything like that.
And I think like in the,
In capital, that's for our business.
This came up during the discussion.
Yeah, because we had talked about a separate asset fund being developed for all of these. I mean, in our capital, I did talk about a subcategory in capital 3 or 4, but it would be cleaner if it was a separate bundle.
yeah. And I think we can have, like in the case of the court, we can have our commissioning agent, I see Mike back there, kind of help us as we get closer to the end of that to say, here's when things, here's your lifespan on some of these big systems and what your eventual cost is going to be. And he might be able to say, over the next 10 years, you're going to spend this much. So much, some rough numbers, so at least we have some projections of what we want to put there. We can do the same thing in the sheriff's department too, to at least give us some guidelines of what we think we might need. Okay? All right, anything else on that? All right.
So do you want this back on the agenda for next month?
Can I ask you a question? So are we going to, whether we fund it, say at a very minimal level, are we going to establish that in the 2017 budget?
We should.
I guess that's, you can ask about next
We
month, but should we
absolutely
establish?
Well, I think, go ahead.
Well, first of all, the sheriff's facility won't be constructed until
End.
it ends
Until
of
next year.
It won't be till
It's
the
all-
FY 18
But you
budget.
can-
We, I mean, we can put the process in place now, but when we talk about like ETSP, that's the only lease we've approved thus far. There's $45,000 in that particular lease. This is where this all came about
For
from.
maintenance.
Was maintenance and utility payments, and that's where this ball started rolling on this. But I think we can work on, if it's the direction of the board, between Melissa, Dave Tack, Rashawn, Karen, and I, we can work up some different numbers and some projections of what cost replacement it's gonna be. And we're looking out 15, 20 years probably for some of these major
Right.
things. But I don't know that we have to set it tomorrow. I think we need to soon.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I'd like us to work on the policy first, get that kind of steps we're gonna do it before we jam it into this year's budget. I don't see the rush to get it for this year's budget.
No,
Chuck?
We want to have, I would think that,
Well,
so the real question here is this specifically for public safety complex, or are we talking about a capital maintenance?
Well, that's part of this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, and to be able to say we could put a fund together that we could then allocate, it doesn't hurt to start putting dollars away, even if it's small dollars, to create something that has a place to be able to, put funds. So I would support the 17.
I mean, I would like to get it established in 2017. I mean, we can work on the policy, but it's there. If we choose to put some funds there, I mean, and you can always refine and change policy as situations may arise. So I would like to see it established in the 2017 budget. I don't see any reason to delay it.
we got next month. All right, we'll bring it forward next month. Thanks. Oh, sorry.
I think this is a good idea. I think it should be more than just the sheriff's department, but I think it's.
Oh, no,
For all facilities. I know when I came on the board 4 years ago, the forest reserve didn't have a policy for what they're gonna do to upkeep trails or pavilions or anything else. Now there's a policy in place for that, for vehicles, for all these different things. And I think it behooves us to be wise for us to think forward, maybe get Mike involved for our building maintenance side and say, even on our existing buildings, not just new buildings, but see what do we look like. I mean, we just got caught down flat-footed with the boiler on the sheriff's facility, right? So we should be looking at what all our existing services are, not just the new stuff. Flat-footed on the sheriff's facility. It looks like that forecast going to be before we decide to do it. It may help us determine. Thank you.
Yes. You know, I also think that we should work on our policy for rolling stock. And so that discussion should also take place. Maybe not for the 2017 budget, but rolling stock is always an issue. You know, and it's always like, well, you know, they need a vehicle, the sheriff's, we should be able to replace a lot of sheriff vehicles. We should be able to get on a regular cycle of reserving for that. We tried once before, but it never happened. Ron Savara. Ron Savara was really kind of a real pusher of this, and he kind of dropped off. Dr. Savara, if you don't know, he's a math teacher. So, but anyway, he tried to establish it, it just never happened. But I do think we should have the discussion, even if it's not going to be, it won't be established in the 2017 budget, but I think we should start establishing that also.
All right.
Right.
Michelle, you're trying to get your 600 hours, did you?
I'll have it done.
You don't have to do it all.
I just want to show that you work hard, Mike. Yes. Okay.
Even though I don't need any hours.
Yeah, you don't need any hours.
And last up, authorizing county executive to execute necessary documents for the tax program. Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
It must be out of time.
Motion carried. Other new business, I don't think we have any. Any public comment? Public comment? Any reports from anybody? Second, first and second to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.